I'm Vinnie Politan. Thank you for joining us tonight here on Closing Arguments. It's another big hour here, folks, because we have another huge case taking place in Idaho, in Boise, Idaho, the case of the so-called Doomsday Prophet, Chad Daybell. You know him well. We've been covering this story for years, and now finally Chad is on trial. His wife Lori's already been convicted. But today was about Chad and his first wife, Tammy Daybell. There they are. When they were younger, they just met, got married, raised 5 children. More than 2 decades together, raising 5 children. How on earth could it even enter your mind to take the life of your life partner? The woman who brought you 5 children. Well, that's the allegation here. So how did Tammy die? That's really the issue here, because the two sides do not agree on cause and manner of death here. Completely different. This isn't someone else did it. This isn't she was murdered and, oh, maybe Alex Cox did it or Lori did it. No, she was not murdered, is the defense of Chad Daybell. So let's first listen to what the prosecutor says is the cause of death here.
Tammy Daybell, a vivacious, healthy mother, was another individual labeled as a dark spirit to be removed. On October 9th of 2019, she reported being shot at night near her home by a man covered in black. She thought it was a paintball gun. On October 19th, 10 days later, she died in her own home with her husband present. Medical examiners would later determine that the only reasonable explanation for Tammy's death was not of natural causes, but rather a homicide.
That's the prosecution. Now let's listen to the defense. John Pryor for Chad Daybell explaining their position on how Tammy died.
And what Dr. Raven is going to say is that there's no indication that this is either a homicide or any other crime, and that the only conclusion she can come to is you can't determine what the cause of death was. There's no way to determine it. They're going to talk about their mother's health struggles. They're going to talk about their mother's use of various medicinal treatments that she would use, oils that she would put on her leg, medicine and different herbs that she would take, and that her mother was suffering from, a number of maladies, and that she would refuse to go see a doctor.
So there's a big battle of the experts brewing out in Idaho in how she died, cause and manner of death for Tammy Daybell. Now, you heard from the defense, they're saying, listen, our expert says you can't figure it out. There's no way to determine. But Chad Daybell's laying next to her in bed. So I think they've got to argue it was some sort of natural cause here, because he's laying in bed next to her. So if she gets murdered, it's him. So while it's undetermined, obviously they're going to argue that there were other things going on with Tammy Daybell. So like I said, battle the experts. So first up is the expert for the prosecution. And this is the coroner, Brenda Dye, who took the stand and talked about several things that we're going to go through tonight. How Tammy rolls out of bed dead. Pink foam is found on Tammy Daybell. The stomach contained food. And this is significant because Chad said when investigators showed up that she had been sick and had vomited that night. The coroner decided for no autopsy here, not because of the family wishes, but the coroner said no autopsy. And the original cause of death was found as natural, but was then changed to homicide. So let's go through this testimony, but not with me. I'm not an expert. I need one. Joining me now, board-certified forensic pathologist, Dr. Priya Banerjee, back with us. Doctor, great to see you tonight. Thanks so much for joining us. Okay, so I want to go through this testimony piece by piece so you can make it make sense to all of us. Let's begin here with her rolling out of bed dead. Here's the coroner.
He said that he felt her body roll off the bed, and that's what awakened him. And just because of the rigor mortis, the lividity, the coldness of her body, I asked how that was possible if she had been gone that long. And he said it may have been from him pulling on the sheets and releasing her body. If someone's dead, they can't roll out of bed. So I was trying to understand how that woke him up. When somebody is dead, they can't move.
Why, looking back on it, does it not make sense to you?
It would take a lot of force to roll a body out of bed.
Okay, Dr. Priya Banerjee, does it make sense to you that she dies in her sleep, she's cold, whatever, and she rolled out of bed?
That's not happening on its own. So even if the husband had to pull, if Chad had to pull, he's going to have to pull a lot because she's dead weight by that point. She's stiff, right? They already commented that there's rigor mortis and she's cold and stiff, which means she's not going to easily just roll out of bed. So that should have been a red flag to the coroner right then and there.
Yeah, because that's one of the first notable observations at the scene. Okay, let's get to another big part of this case, which is going to be the pink foam. Let's listen.
I observed the blood-tinged sputum coming from her mouth. Kind of a foam, a pink foam. Yes, there was a kitchen towel to the side of the bed. And it had the pink blood-tinged sputum on it. And I asked Chad if he had used that towel. He said yes, that he had used that towel to wipe her face.
What did you learn from the autopsy about that factor, that aspect of Tammy?
All of Tammy's organs were very healthy. There was nothing in the brain. The heart was healthy. The only organ that was not healthy were the lungs. When they were dissected, there was still foam, a lot of foam in the lungs.
How did that impact your decision to change the death certificate?
There shouldn't have been that foam in the lungs still. It was 2 months before she was exhumed and then autopsy was done.
And we can't forget that. Tammy had to be exhumed for this autopsy to take place. So Dr. Priya Banerjee, the foam that is still there in her lungs, the lungs not healthy, pink foam, what does that mean to you? What does that tell you?
Well, I think this is a more non-specific finding, meaning you see this if someone has heart disease, a heart attack, head trauma, drug overdose. You can see it in so many different reasons. You can see it in strangulation, asphyxia. So it doesn't mean that it's specific, but again, why would she have this? And I think, hindsight is 20/20, especially when the coroner was so inexperienced, that ultimately I think we came to the right answer, and that it's impressive to me that 2 months later they would still see this foam and what we call pulmonary edema being that extra fluid in the lungs still present. That's really impressive.
So let me ask you this, Doctor. You mentioned there's other things that could result with this pink foam. The other causes, other than strangulation, would they manifest themselves in other things that you would observe during the autopsy?
Oh, yeah. So toxicology, heart disease, head trauma. I mean, there's so many different possibilities of pulmonary edema. You see it in drowning. I mean, none of those are applicable to this case, especially when they said that the heart was healthy. We know she didn't have a heart attack.
So can you, when you come to an opinion like this, then do you go through a process of elimination?
Absolutely. So what I just read off to you in my mind is what's called a differential diagnosis. It's, when I'm approaching a case, I think of what are the possibilities. Some are more common than others. And, in the coroner's initial perspective, she was young and she just took the family's word for it and said, okay, what's more likely than anything? It's coronary disease, heart disease. That's what so many people die of. We know that statistic. So if everything else sort of checks out on initial survey, we're going back and finding that it doesn't. They sign it out as heart disease, and sort of close the case. It's only in retrospect and the other anomalies that brought it to light.
Let's get to another important issue here, which is the contents of Tammy's stomach. Let's watch.
He said about 12:30 she was having a coughing fit and she vomited in the bathroom. He helped her back to bed. She said she was okay. And then he went to sleep. It didn't make sense that she had thrown up the night before because she still had stomach contents.
I pause you, please.
Yes.
Explain that to the jury, please.
So her stomach was full of food. If she threw up, there wouldn't be food in her stomach during the autopsy.
You did talk to Chad, and he talked to you about the fact that Tammy vomited the night before, correct?
Yes.
And you had mentioned about the stomach. Was that stomach completely full?
No, not completely.
So when you said that you found it unusual that her stomach was full, it wasn't really full. It just had contents in it. Is that fair?
Yes.
Okay, Dr. Priya Banerjee, what does this mean now? Again, Chad is saying she's sick the night before and she's throwing up, I think, more than once. But let's presume just once, that she throws up once. Could there still be things in her stomach? What are you looking for?
Yeah, I think it's just, so stomach contents are very controversial, especially when you have different people on different medications and different foods. So like a fast food meal that's very fatty, that will go through a lot slower. Now, I don't know how sick she was, but they said that she threw up. And, again, I think it's a possibility that some of it's left behind. So, again, is it a little off? Yes. Can it go with the story? Possibly.
I wondered if they looked for any evidence of the vomit. Probably not that night. I'm sure they didn't, because they just said natural causes and they moved on.
Yeah,
and then,
vomiting, you can vomit. Sometimes people get, heartburn, vomiting with a heart attack. So that's, again, not like that's just not a huge red flag for any one condition.
let's get to the next issue, which was the decision that was made initially for no autopsy.
Now, as a coroner, do you make a decision about an autopsy based upon a family's wishes?
No.
Is that something you consider, though?
Ultimately, the decision is up to me. If I deem one necessary, then I do it, regardless of family's wishes.
At the time that you made your original determination, had you heard the name J.J. Vallow or Tylee Ryan?
No.
Did information related to those names also impact your decision to amend the death certificate?
Yes.
As you sit there today, do you have any regrets about your original decision?
Yes.
What are those regrets?
Yeah. Had I known that information, I would have ordered an autopsy.
At no time did the family ever try to prevent you from doing an autopsy in this case. Is that right?
Emma stated she didn't want one done, but
Okay.
it's my choice. Ultimately, my choice. Yes.
Emma didn't want one done because she didn't want her mother cut up, right?
Correct. Yes.
She didn't want her mother subjected to she didn't want her mother treated that way as part of the examination. Is that what her primary and only concern was?
Yes.
Okay. And yet Chad was indifferent one way or the other. He didn't tell you one way or the other whether he wanted one or didn't want one. Isn't that true?
Yes.
And ultimately, it's not the family's decision whether this occurs. It's your decision whether this occurs. Is that right?
Yes.
And based on the facts as you saw them, you saw some old bruises that you identified in your report, right? Correct?
Bruises.
There were no other indications of a struggle or a fight as it related to Tammy Daybell's body. Is that right?
No, not that I noticed. No.
Okay, Dr. Priya Banerjee, this was a problem for prosecutors, obviously. What are your thoughts?
Lots to take in here. So, I think being in her shoes as the new coroner, you have to go back in time. She's young, and as far as she can tell, it's no overt struggle. So we look for injuries. Now, you cannot accurately date bruises by looking at them. That's a very common misconception. There's literature to support that. So an old bruise, I don't know what she meant by that. She later says that she's not experienced enough to talk about that. So it's a common misconception that the color of a bruise is accurate in terms of age. So the fact that she had bruises, is that how he held her down, incapacitated her? And then, I guess it's just important you're going to feel the pressure from the family. Not everybody wants an autopsy, especially in the sudden death of their mom. And I think that honestly had to play a pressure.
I agree.
On her decision making.
If the family, the daughter is like, listen, and she dies at home, let's just move on and grieve. All right, let's get to the final issue here, which is cause of death.
You mentioned a second ago that you had included in your potential cause of death a heart attack. What led you to include that?
A cardiac event, just because of the extremely low blood pressure and the fainting, which if your blood pressure does drop really low, it does make you faint.
Have you recently made any amendments to the death certificate?
Yes.
And what have you done with that?
The manner of death was changed to homicide. The cause of death was changed to asphyxiation by suffocation.
Okay, Dr. Priya Banerjee, can you have a cardiac-related issue if you go in and examine the heart and the heart is healthy?
Potentially. So once someone's dead, you don't see the electrical activity of the heart like you do on an EKG. And so there are things like that, the conduction system, the energy going through the heart that we are, regular doctors can check, whether it's a blood pressure, a heartbeat, anything like that, that's lost. It is. Now, when we look at the heart, we're looking for any recognizable abnormalities. Most commonly, when you think of a heart attack, you think, blocking of the blood vessels that supply the heart. That would be the most common. Sometimes you can see other valve problems, whatnot, and I'm sure my colleague, Dr. Christensen's very reliable. He looked for that. So, when you have this full exam, obviously it's going to be more complete than speculating, right? That's what the coroner initially did. She just used her, judgment at the time and statistics, really, that coronary disease is so common and she died in her sleep. Let's go with that. But obviously, when you have a detailed autopsy, that's going to tell you so much more. That's when they look at the neck muscles, the structures of the neck, such as the hyoid bone that sits up here. It's a very protected bone. And I don't know if that's broken in this case, but those are the very delicate structures of the neck. The neck's very protected. So once you look at that, you're going to get a much more complete understanding of what happened. And even if she had a heart problem, she didn't die from it. She died from the strangulation. She died with the heart problem, not because of it.
Dr. Priya Banerjee, incredible insight. That's why we bring you in. Thank you so much. I know your time is valuable, but we do appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, folks, when we come back, they are in the studio tonight. Josh Schiffer, Meg Strickler, Daryl Cohen. What do they think? Can prosecutors prove that Tammy was murdered?
Did you have any association or interaction with Ms. Daybell back then?
Yes.
What was that association?
She was a student in my clogging class in Sugar City. It was every week, a 60-minute class once a week.
Did she attend regularly?
Yes, every class.
How would you describe clogging overall? Would it be low intensity, medium intensity, high intensity? Where would you put it?
I would say medium intensity because you're still getting that cardio and getting your heart rate up.
Do you ever recall her falling behind in class?
No,
Do you ever recall any issues with her getting tired?
no,
Any issues at all that you recall with her ability to perform the clogging and keep up with the class?
no.
This to me is just dynamite testimony. This tells you about who she was and how she was doing. She's clogging every week. I don't know if you've ever clogged, but it's a workout. It's a physical workout. It's not easy. It's not easy. First, it takes some skills, but it's also physically, there's some intensity to it. So to me, this just paints a picture of health for Tammy Daybell, just like her heart was described. Healthy heart, yeah, she's clogging every week. Let's bring in our think tank. Join us live in studio tonight. Criminal defense attorney, entertainment attorney, former assistant DA in Atlanta, Daryl Cohn is with us. Also joining us tonight, criminal defense attorney Meg Strickler, and the man behind the glasses, criminal defense attorney Josh Schiffer. Now, I know a secret here. We have a clogger. You're a clogger.
I was a clogger.
And so describe for the folks who don't know what clogging is, what is it and how intense is it?
It's very intense. So I really disagree that it's medium. I think it's very intense. When I used to go to camp in North Carolina, we used to watch cloggers and they gave us some cloggers.
What's a clogger? There's
a
like
dance.
There's
It's a
10,000 people today. I don't know what it is.
Probably more.
Yeah.
It's a dance and you move your feet. I mean, I can't do it.
It's kind
here.
of like tap dancing, but not exactly.
It resembles that remark.
It's similar to a really fast crip walk. If you watch the gangsters when they do the crip walk, it's like a really fast version of that. Kind of like, what is it, tap dancing? Except with big shoes.
Big, heavy shoes with metal things that'll make the noise.
It's a workout.
It's a workout. All right, so Meg, she's doing this every week. Like if you're on the brink of death, like's been described here.
I'm going to be the contrarian on this. Even if it's 1 hour a week, that's nothing for cardio health. 1 hour.
No, but she did it
week.
without a problem.
Yeah, but
Here's the thing:
know.
if you have a problem, no, I know. For instance, like when I got asthma, half a game of pickleball, my hands are on my knees, I can't breathe. Right? I've got medicine now, so I can play. All right.
It's like me cross country skiing.
But she just shows up with no problem. So she's doing other things, obviously.
Sometimes a PFA, sometimes picked from air. I had a physician. I went to him. He was in perfect health. He gave me a great physical. The next day, he died in his sleep. He had no previous problems. Things happen over which we have no control. Now, in having said that...
But that would be evident in an autopsy now, wouldn't it?
But why would you do an autopsy? If they had known all of the facts surrounding Chad the Daybell, then of course they would have had an autopsy. But here it seemed so innocent and so sad. And so I understand why the coroner, or here we would call her a medical examiner, why she did not perform an autopsy. But once things became more clear, once all of the facts and circumstances surrounding Chad Daybell's family and his life became obvious, then the autopsy within 2 months.
Two murdered children buried in the backyard, by the way.
Man, I'm sorry. The first victim in this case was public integrity for this coroner. This was somebody that got called, hey, we got a dead lady. All right, that's what I do for a living. I'm a coroner. I show up and process dead people. Well, husband says she rolled out of the bed and was dead, and man, I'm just going to bag it and tag it and be done and listen to the daughter and not do an autopsy because really the daughter said,
That's a mistake. That's a mistake. But that doesn't mean she wasn't murdered.
No, it doesn't mean it wasn't murdered, but it certainly doesn't go to prove any murder. That the coroner admittedly didn't do a full investigation, admittedly came to the wrong conclusion, admittedly didn't do their job well, and is now getting up and testifying that 2 months later, we found some stuff and changed some stuff. Now, it's one thing to not do your job very well, but then to have somebody potentially convicted and death penalty.
Let me ask you this, though. The battle of these experts, according to the opening statements, is going to go like this. The prosecution says homicide. The defense says we don't know what it is. We don't know what it is. Well, okay, you don't know what it is, but I know there's 2 dead children buried in the backyard. And I know that their mother marries the man who says, oh, she's been sick and throwing up.
Precisely, so it doesn't matter. Assuming the jury cannot or does not convict him, assuming on that one charge, there's a mistrial. There are 2 other kids that have been murdered. He's going to go down for them, and it won't matter.
Well, the problem with that is those 2 children don't die at his house in his bed. Those 2 children die at her house, we believe, or at the park.
And it's completely unfair to use what it could easily be a natural death of a spouse and then try to connect it to these 2 completely...
What do you mean try to connect it? There is a connection.
But that's the question. It's a connection once they go back 2 months after and dig her up and go, sorry, we made the completely wrong conclusion, and now we're going to say she's murdered only because there's this other stuff.
What do you mean only because?
Correlation is not causation.
You know, I feel sorry for this coroner. I really do. She did what 99.9% of the people would do without any obvious signs of trauma or murder.
She could have tried to, when that's their whole job, is to investigate the scene.
Well, let me tell you, the job of a husband is like, what happened? Well, how did my wife die? Please tell me what happened here.
Yeah, and that didn't
But
happen.
he didn't say that.
And apparently he was extraordinarily distraught. He was crying. He was freaking out. He was doing everything that everybody says you're supposed to do when your wife is dead in bed. Problem is, I don't believe his story at all. I think
one thing you're not supposed to do is marry another woman 17 days later in Hawaii.
But let's not get away from the fact
and call the next morning to find out when you can get your insurance money.
His awful doesn't excuse the incompetent.